Hi, this is Iverson from Tallinn University. I'm a junior research fellow and also part of the EU-funded Advancing Transregional Border projects. So let us first introduce ourselves and explain what we do so that you can see why we are asking this question related to borders and refugees. So it's about borders and bordering. At Tallinn University, we're running a Eur-Asian Border Lab. We're doing partnership with colleagues from University of Eastern Finland and also University of Amsterdam. Eur-Asian Border Lab is an online-offline platform of scholars who put borders to the center of study. So first, we study about like the key developments in the world, such as state sovereignty, aggression, asylum seeking, in particular refugees and migration, but also tackling other topics such as like climate change and also the spread of epidemics like the COVID-19. We have also, issues related to borders and, bordering in the center of focus. So this is why the state and policy response are often simple that, people say close the border, to face, what is like a threat, or for example, talk about migrants or like COVID. And furthermore, in state sovereignty spaces, various regimes have taken power using conception of sovereignty to commit atrocities, violation of human rights, and also, rule through violence with the test of the world, not able to intervene meaningfully. And secondly, bordering is conduced more subtly through different language or education identity politics, for example, like with the linguistic minorities here in Estonia. Border studies in academia try to bring forth the hidden issues in society, such as politics in power, hidden tensions, social justice, and violence. So we see bordering as a human practice of organizing and sort out regulating social and political space. At Tallinn University, as many of our colleagues do research in Asia, we try to connect the problems and thinking about borders across two regions in order to learn from each other. So today, Sigrid, after a long introduction, can you tell us very briefly about what you do with your work at Estonian Refugee Council and how does it connect to asylum seekers or refugees in general?
Hi, my name is Sigrid Solnik. I'm the head of Estonian programs at the Estonian Refugee Council. At DRC, we actually operate in 5 different countries. We have offices in Estonia, Ukraine, Armenia, Georgia, and in Jordan. While we are doing humanitarian aid work in other countries, in Estonia we work with refugees and asylum seekers, and we have been doing it for 25 years already. We offer counseling services, we do trainings, we organize MHPSS focused events, community events. And we do a lot of advocacy also on national level, on local level. So we're trying in every way stand up for the rights of refugees and asylum seekers. Maybe briefly an introduction.
That seems like you have got a wide range of work from consultation, services, and advocacy. So I think the first very direct question is about your experience during your work. So how do refugees experience borders in terms of like how physically they encounter borders, how emotionally they feel maybe sometimes excluded by the borders, and even psychologically how they deal with that when they first arrive in Estonia?
I think it very much depends where do people come from. So there is a huge difference between how, Ukrainian refugees experience borders and how people from other places experience borders. Like if people end up on the green border and then kind of meet with border guards and then are transferred through the border points and enter the system where they are vetted whether they qualify for international protection or not. I think this is one kind of experience where the border is not even that physical, but emotionally and probably kind of like the experience is rough. And then the example of Ukrainian refugees who started arriving here after the full-scale war broke out 3 years ago. And this, in like border-wise, it was a very smooth transition. People were just ordered buses in Poland, for example, and ended up in Tallinn, in Pärnu, or any other bigger city, and they were granted the temporary protection, where you don't really meet the border guard at least in the beginning. Afterwards, when you need to like prolong it or renew it, then it's different. Yeah, it depends. The experience of borders depends very much where do you come from.
So before, you just mentioned about Ukraine, but before zooming in this particular category, then let's zoom out a little bit, talk about the temporary protection procedure. So as you mentioned, so I think for lots of asylum seekers, they have to wait during the period of, getting granted, and they have to wait in the country, for example, here in Estonia. So how do you think this kind of waiting process is affecting them?
What we have heard of, or what is the feedback from people while they are waiting for the decision whether they get the protection or not. I think what has been described as most difficult is this being like in between. You don't know what will happen with you for months. I think it's up to 6 months depending on the case. People are not allowed to work at that time, so you're basically just not just sitting around, but it's a very idle period of time. I think in this limbo, or in this kind of limbo of waiting for something to happen. I think for children it's in this sense easier because they will go to school right away. Kind of, so it's kind of, it's more meaningful for a child, but for a parent, it's
So I'm quite sure through your work you might have experience or dealing with a lot of refugees and also the stories. Could you share a story or two or observation that has stayed with you, something in particularly that get you, I don't know, personal or emotional, that you find it very extraordinary to share?
I think this may be the story from one Syrian woman who, back in 2015 or 16, when the Syrian crisis, Syrian refugee crisis, was out there, and it was a period in Estonia where the society was really scared of, oh my God, what is going to happen? All these hundreds of people will come to Estonia. I think in the end we hosted around 300 Syrian refugees. At the moment we have 42,000 Ukrainian refugees in Estonia. So these numbers are very different, but the way society perceived the refugees was also very different, right? And then was this Syrian lady who, with her family, she had, her son was around 5 years old or something at that time, I think, and her husband, they crossed the Mediterranean. They ended up in Greece in refugee camp, and then they were offered the opportunity to come to Estonia. There was this I don't remember the exact name of this scheme where one European country took in refugees from Greece or Italy based on
the quota system.
Yeah, the quota system. Thank you. Anywho, this lady was having this interview with the Estonian official. And was said that, okay, we can offer you the opportunity to come to Estonia. And she, the way she recounted it was and then I asked them, okay, can I have 5 minutes? And she left the room and Googled Estonia. She had never heard about the country before, right? And Googled Estonia. And the first thing she saw was that the Estonian education system is as good as the Finnish one. And she was like, yes, of course, I will go there. And yeah, basically she ended up in the Estonian winter, right? So a very different place from where she had come from. So this, I think what stuck with me with the story, in this story, is how these big decisions can be made based on very little information, or this kind of the road refugees or asylum seekers, the road they have to take. It's very challenging. It's life-changing. And small things can change a lot about your future. So, yeah.
So just now you talk about the bigger picture, how Estonia is being part of the EU. So let's move on with this question on asylum policies. So how do you think Estonia's geopolitical positioning is affecting its refugee policies towards third country national? The fact that it's being part of the EU, you mentioned, and also security speaking is also part of the NATO transatlantic alliance. How does it shape the daily realities of refugees living in Estonia?
I'm not sure how much it is changing the daily, everyday realities of refugees living here. I think with a wider geopolitical picture, Estonia is the eastern. We stand guard on the eastern border of the EU, right? And in these times where Russia is doing what they are doing, so the securitization level is really high. When talking about refugees, I see more and more like this, the context of securitization, and the refugee question is seen in the context of securitization. So they are not just people asking for refuge, but they could also much more be seen as the hybrid weapons of Russia on the Estonian border, and stuff like that. We haven't had this kind of border situations as Poland or Latvia or Lithuania have encountered, luckily, yet. But I think it's very, very worrying in this sense. But then again, talking about the Ukrainian refugees, and Estonia is one of the biggest per capita hosters in Europe. I think Estonia, we as a society and Estonia as a country, we say that we kind of understand the Russian threat, and we understand the Ukrainian situation and what Ukrainians are fighting for. And I think the society was very, very extremely welcoming of Ukrainian refugees in this sense. And I think mostly because we see that we could be in a very similar situation. So it's this very humane approach towards the Ukrainians who sought for refuge.
So maybe let me pick up the first part of your answer. You were talking about this notion of securitization and also the hybrid threats. And such instances have been, let's say, somehow picked up by the state actor from the eastern side of Estonia. They're using, for example, videos saying that, well, Estonian border guards are like violently rejecting, the refugees from other countries, coming from Russia, and so on and so forth. And then in scholarship, a lot of academics are framing this as the weaponization of refugees. So what do you think about this? Like, do you feel like this cause or like the situation with the Russian invasion of Ukraine is more or less like dehumanizing the presence of refugees in different countries? Or how justified do you think it is? Like, how should we perceive this latest development in the geopolitical dynamics affecting refugees?
Well, in one hand, you could say that every country has the right to defend its borders, right? And the Russian threat in this sense is very real. On the other hand, people are never weapons. And the reasons why people want to escape the harsh realities they live in, these are like valid reasons. And Estonia, as part of EU and UN and everything, we have said that, well, we are based on this international law, everybody has the right to ask for protection. And while we have the right to defend our borders, we also need to kind of assess each and every claim for the protection, right? And this is something Estonian border guards have not done, or we haven't had the situations where people are just pushed back, right? I think, or maybe I'm mistaken now. I think everybody who reaches the border has the right to ask for protection. And then the question is whether they get it or not, right? But I think it's definitely we can talk about the way different refugee groups are seen is very different. Like Ukraine, it's like simplification, of course, but Ukrainian refugees are kind of okay, and then people from sub-Saharan Africa are not okay. It's not my perspective. It's just the way sometimes in the society we see different refugee groups. So there's definitely a worrisome approach.
Yeah, I understand it's quite difficult to answer this kind of question since you talk about the dilemma between defending a sovereign state border versus defending human rights, where refugees and asylum seekers, they have the right to claim for the asylum. So moving on to that, within this context, what are the main challenges in defending refugees' rights given the situation we just talked about?
I think the first thing is defending everybody's right to ask for asylum. So we didn't have the pushbacks, or we had the means and the processes in place so that everybody who asks for asylum gets the due and fair process of because the system is there. The question is whether we apply it in the situation of crisis, right? And we say that no matter what, we need to apply because this is the right thing to do. This is the humane thing to do. Other challenges. Of course, everything related to adaptation. I think it's like the access to services for temporary protection holders is very, very good. Of course, they're like on personal level, whether you know about the service and whether you are asking for help or stuff like that, it might depend. But everybody has the right to very like same kind of services as the Estonian citizens or the temporary protection holders. With other international protection, the asylum seekers, the question about access to labor market, access to language courses, balancing the need to find at one point when people have the protection, balancing the need to find and keep a job and then learning the language, which might be difficult to kind of put together, and yeah, stuff like that can be challenging.
Then we can move on to other broader topics. For example, how Estonian Refugee Council is being seen externally, because from what I understand, it happens quite often that if you work as an NGO, when you face governmental actors or like international stakeholders, their views and their policies tend to be more conservative, and NGOs tend to, let's say, be more vocal, and also like, you know, being like an advocate to advocate rights as stipulated in international law and so on. How do you navigate this? Because sometimes I'm not sure if you have experienced cases where maybe the government officials, they just take your word and they will just keep the policy the way it is. So how do you see this kind of positioning of NGOs like in general? Do you think that they have to be more aligned, maybe to just try to appeal to the government so that they will make changes more easily, or should NGOs like Estonian Refugee Council to be more like activists, like, you know, we have to defend the rights and, you know, standing on the side of the refugees? I know it's difficult, but just wondering your thoughts on that.
I think also within every organization, there are different voices. There are people who are saying that, well, we should be more vocal. Why don't we have a statement on like this, that, and the third issue? And then there are people who are like, no, we are not going to do public statements on this. This is not our core business. So the balance somehow comes from there. But it definitely is challenging to be this advocacy, like the watchdog, and then trying to partner with the state in providing services. How do you and it's the rope, balancing on a rope, I think. But I think, and this is why I really love being in the civil society organization, that we can, while remaining friendly and cooperative, we can still be more vocal about the shortcomings of the system or the wording of the laws or stuff like that. I think people in ministries can, while they are the ones holding the pencil and writing stuff, they cannot be so vocal even if they wanted to.
So to wrap up this interview, maybe we can go even more abstract to think about borders in the world in general. What do you see the future of borders in Estonia, in Europe, and globally? Are we moving towards more openness or more rigidity, that, you know, states going to be more defensive on their borders? And what are your thoughts on that?
Looking at what happened in the German elections just this weekend and all similar advancements, or I don't know even if we can call it advancement. I think it's rather like saddening or even depressing to see this fortress Europe being built up, the way we as Europeans, we make borders more physical and more deadly to people we say are not kind of worthy enough to enter this land of abundance we have here in Europe. And I think this is a wrong way to go. I do hope that in these times where all the national governments are trying to build up the borders and Europe in general is becoming more closed, I hope, like on this very like community level, maybe the mental borders will not be built that strongly, and somehow like hopefully if the bigger picture is going to be more closed and more deadly to refugees, we can still keep this sparkle of hope on the local level. Because I think even like no border construction is going to stop people from moving, right? Migration has always been there, is there, and will be there in the future. The question is whether the borders or systems we have, how deadly they are, or whether the human rights will be there on the road from one place to another.
I think to end the interview, just to ask, how do you balance empathy and your professionalism while working on issues like, people's rights, getting to country, getting a process done, advocating for their rights? Like, how do you balance this? Like, because as a person, I suppose that you might empathize a lot, but then in practice, you know that there are limitations as well, So how do you strike a balance?
Maybe I'm not even the right person to answer, because as the head of programs, I don't work with personal stories that much, which is, in one hand, it's a blessing. On the other hand, it's kind of gets stuck in the systems and in the advocacy. But I think in every organization such as us, we should have this mental health part in place for people who work with asylum seekers and refugees, not to lose the way, not to lose your let's say this, not professional skills, but the ability to do something in this in these sad stories, because usually the refugee, the reasons why people go to a road and the way, so the reasons why people are refugees and the ways they are treated are not often good stories, right? So I think we as employers and as organizations need to put this structure in place that the people who work for us and with refugees or asylum seekers are in a good place in the end.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sigrid, thank you for your time for taking the interview.